Where did we leave off? We on?
We are
Friday?
talking about 2.5 Men, and let's talk a little bit about the casting.
We didn't finish the week.
We did not finish the week.
The week ends on Friday, where we have a camera run through where we see the show for the first time on camera and decide whether or not we're shooting it appropriately. And then on 7 o'clock on Friday night, we bring in an audience and play it out for them and see if they laugh. And if they don't laugh, we rewrite it till they do.
You're there till 3 in the morning.
No, actually, we've gotten pretty good at it. We generally get home about 11.
So now let's talk a little bit about the casting. You told us about finding Charlie already. How did you come about finding Jon Cryer?
Well, that's a really kind of cool story because when we started discussing who shall play Charlie's brother, and we'd written the script, and it was very much going to be a buddy comedy, and the CBS executive in charge of casting said, let's talk about who's going to play Charlie's brother, and let's not hear the words ever, Jon Cryer. So that was the very first words said at the first conversation about who's going to be his brother. They had made up their minds that John was a show killer because he'd been in several pilots and series that didn't go. So, forgetting the fact that when you get in a pilot, it means you've beaten out hundreds of actors to get the job, and it's an amazing feat to do it once, let alone over and over again, which John had done. The shows didn't work. That's not really attributable to him. Some shows don't work, and sometimes the show could be good and it doesn't work. Teddy Z should have gone on forever. It was a great series. It didn't work. It was ahead of its time. Anyway, John's representatives, I had worked with John before, so I knew his work, and I was kind of disappointed that they didn't want to meet or even see him. But his representatives said, you really should see him for this part. So there was nothing in that conversation with CBS to keep me from seeing John read for the part, and he read for the part, and he was brilliant. He clearly heads and shoulders above anyone else trying out for the part. And it was perfect. And when we brought in our choices for the part to CBS, the day before we go to CBS to let them weigh in on our choices, the head of casting said, who are you bringing? And I said, well, you're not going to be very happy. And there's a dead silence on the phone, and he said, you're bringing Cryer, aren't you? And I went, you really have to see him. I don't care about, I know how you feel, but you need to see the actor do this part. And he came in and read in the worst possible circumstance. They really didn't want to like him, but he was brilliant. And it was inescapably the right choice. It was, and he has never been anything other than brilliant on this show every week. He's one of the great comic actors of our time.
And tell us about casting Angus.
Angus was the only little boy who read for the part. I had seen him in a Dennis Quaid movie called The Rookie, and he was adorable. He was probably 6 years old, and he was a scene stealer in that great movie, great baseball movie. And he came in and read. He read with Charlie, and he read just with the casting director, and we were in love with him. He was just, he was so not the child actor. He was just having a good time. He's just having fun. I don't think he cared if he got the job. He was just having a good time. He wasn't worried. He wasn't trying to look good. And when he read at CBS, he read a scene with Charlie, and he got the giggles. Charlie was cracking him up, and he just was, all the CBS executives are sitting there, very serious. This is very serious business. And this 8-year-old boy is giggling, which I thought was terrific. It meant he was paying attention. Charlie's being silly. The appropriate response is to laugh. He's laughing, and I remember Mr. Moonves saying, "What are you going to do about the giggles? How are you going to handle it?" First of all, they were offended because I didn't bring in any other choices. You're supposed to bring in more than one actor so that they have a choice. That's the protocol. I didn't want to bring in another actor because I was afraid they'd make the wrong choice. I wanted Angus. And Les said, "What are you going to do about the giggles?" And Jimmy Burrows was sitting there, and he goes, "I'll taser him." I'll hit him with a cattle prod. Don't worry about it. What are we going to be? What do you mean? What are you going to do? He's giggling. I don't know. He'll stop giggling eventually. And now he's going off to college next year. It's amazing to watch this young man grow up.
How do you deal with his aging through the course of the series?
We just embraced it. It was part of the. It's a gift of the series that the stories got different. They got better. They got more complicated. 9-year-old simple problems. 16 years old, the problems get much more complicated. That's good for writers. There was never any effort to keep him young. Dumbass, goofy teenager, terrific. And actually, it's very far from Angus. He's really a smart and grounded human being. He really, quite the gentleman.
Let's talk about some of the other cast members. Tell us a little about Conchata Ferrell.
I was supposed to be one episode. He was cast in the second episode to play Charlie's housekeeper, who quits because she doesn't want to take care of a kid, and it was supposed to be one episode, but we fell in love with Conchata. We just okay. New plan. You're in every episode. She was a breath of fresh air in that she brought something to that character that we had never. I don't think we really saw that far ahead. But being his gatekeeper and maintaining this trying to keep this household together with a character like Charlie's was a special. Someone he was afraid of. To have a housekeeper who was essentially his employee, but yet he feared. That was a nice dynamic, and only Conchata could do it.
And how about Holland Taylor?
Blythe Danner was originally Charlie and Alan's mother, and it just didn't work. I don't know why. It's just one of those things where, after we shot the pilot, a couple of scenes, she just wasn't comfortable in it. It didn't feel right, and after the show got picked up, we reshot those scenes with Holland, and Holland just fell right into it, and it was the right thing to do.
And how about Maren Hinkle?
Maren had that right quality, of a unhappy wife, who was struggling to get out of a marriage and discover herself. And of course, we did all the silly things that comedy writers do in the beginning. She was, we went down a lot of false roads, like maybe I'm gay. The road in the beginning, she thinks she's gay, and looking back, I'd like to do that again. It wasn't necessary, but it was an effort to be a little bit, edgy, but entirely unnecessary. Unhappy being married to John Cryer. I think that would have been enough, I think it was a line in the pilot that Lee's wife, his former wife, had said to him, "Sometimes when I come home and I know you're there, I have to pull over to the side of the road and cry," or something like that. I think that says it all, we didn't have to have her exploring alternate lifestyles, but, the writing process is not always, accurate.
And how about Melanie Linsky?
Melanie was supposed to be one episode as well. We wanted to explore some of the, just to get a glimpse of when you have a man who is endless series of one-night stands. Some of them don't go well, and some of them can create danger. And we wanted to get a peek at the danger in his life in the pilot, that he had slept with a woman once, and she was not going to let it go. and Melanie brought this adorable quality to what is essentially a very dark character. You know, stalking is not funny in its essence. It's threatening. It's scary. You know, in the real world, it's not adorable. But Melanie Linsky, and you know, seeing the great film work she's been doing in the last couple of years, was capable of making it absolutely adorable, and we kept it. We kept it as a particle, as an element in the series, just an ongoing part of the show, part of our ensemble.
You mentioned the original pilot that didn't air and then the pilot that did air. Can you tell us other differences besides Holland Taylor?
I think in the very first scene of 2.5 Men in the original pilot, Alan comes in and interrupts Charlie post-coital. And it occurred to us rather belatedly, isn't it funnier if he interrupts his brother pre-coital? So that changed. And I think that was it. We changed the very first scene to interrupt his brother before he had this romantic rendezvous with a very beautiful woman. And then we redid the scenes with Holland.
In the end of season 1, you did an episode called An Old Flame with a New Wick. Mm-hmm. And you were nominated for a GLAAD Award for that. Mm-hmm. What did that mean to you, and how has that changed at all through the seasons?
That actually came about. I had read the book Middlesex. The book Middlesex was about a hermaphrodite struggling to figure out his identity, and it's also how the family responds when he decides he's a she. And I'm maybe getting it all wrong. This is quite a while ago. But I was really enthralled with what it means, what gender means to identity, you know, and how we view someone through their gender. And Chris O'Donnell. I know Chris through a golf club I belong to, and he said, I want to be on your show around the same time. And I said, well, I'd be great. You know, he was Robin, remember? He was, that was his claim to fame at the time. He was a movie star. And I had no idea how to use Chris O'Donnell on 2.5 Men, but then Middlesex, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if Charlie had dated a woman who decided that she preferred being a man after and reconnected with her. And now the story was really about, can we still... You liked me as a woman, am I still the same person? You know? I mean, does the bond transcend genitalia? You know? And of course it got weirder because, Chris comes back as a man and then starts dating Charlie's mother, and, it's just really got very creepy, but it was a bold little story.
The author was Jeffrey...
Eugenides.
Yes.
Yeah, Jeffrey Eugenides, yeah.
So let's talk about production in season 8 ended up getting canceled after 16 episodes. Why did that happen?
Really? I have to tell you why we canceled the show after 16 episodes in season 8? Isn't that kind of redundant? The star of the show had a drug problem. I mean, you can paint it any which way you want and have endless conversations and arguments about it, but the star of the show was a drug addict, and it was destructive. It was destructive to him. It was destructive to other people, and made producing the show impossible. So, it was about drug addiction. Mm-hmm. End of story. Really, there's no other. There's really, nothing else is relevant. Cocaine.
So did you think about canceling the show at that time, or?
I had no idea how the show could continue without Charlie. It was beyond my wildest dreams that the show could go on. We started with Charlie. I mean, I wasn't under any illusion that, we'd built our church on that rock. He was, he was the starting point for the series. So yes, when when it all collapsed, I didn't imagine it would go forward. No.
Did you think about leaving personally at the time?
I thought about leaving long before then, but to my everlasting dismay, I didn't. I didn't. It was spinning out of control long before that. And when there's physical violence involved, when people are attacking other people, you really have no business carrying on like nothing's happening. But I did, so I regret that. But I thought we were going to get through it. I thought we were all going to be sober and productive and heal. That didn't happen.
And how did you react to what Charlie was saying about you in the press?
I was hurt because I thought we had a great relationship, and we'd made 186, 87 shows together, and we'd had an incredible success, and babies had been born, and marriages had happened, and marriages had unhappened, and we'd done very well, and we'd laughed and had a good time, and the working environment was very easy. It was a totally non-dramatic environment. It was, people went home for dinner, and it was as pleasant an environment as one could ask for. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed working with him. So I was stunned and hurt.
Do you have any relationship with him now?
No.
And so once he left, you started searching for a replacement.
No,
what other actors did you consider?
Once he left, I worked on The Big Bang Theory, and I worked on Mike and Molly, and I really, I had no idea what to do next. It wasn't, okay, now let's move forward and find someone to replace him. I really thought we were done, So, it was a while later that I started thinking initially about Hugh Grant, Is there anyone else who can play the decadent character with elegance and charm like Charlie, And it's a very rare quality. It goes back to Dean Martin, where you can have the flamboyant, drunken womanizer and not be offended. It's a hard thing to do. It's easy to go, creepy, And we'd met with you and talked about it, but ultimately he decided it wasn't right for him, and I truly didn't think there was any other path to go, and I thought, okay, that's the end of the show, and Les Moonves called me and said, you really need to meet with Ashton, and I said, I think Ashton's too young for the part. He's a terrific actor, but he's 33, and John's in his mid-40s, and he says, just meet with him, and when you meet with Ashton, you quickly get it. Ashton's a remarkable human being as well as a very crafty actor. And I had no idea how to do it with him. I think the original idea may have been to make him a decadent actor, star with an entourage and whatnot. And I pitched it and then I retracted it. I said, here's what I think we should do. And then I said, no. A couple of days later I went, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go down that darkness again. But Ashton is very engaged in social media and internet companies, and he's really brilliant in that arena. And it's really a hopeful, productive, constructive world he lives in. He's a dynamic guy. So let's capture some of that. Let's make this character, let's go away from Entourage and go towards Mark Zuckerberg, but gorgeous. You know what I mean? He's crazy, good-looking guy, and then the trick became, how do you take a guy who's got everything and make him appealing and make people care for him? And for better or worse, my thought was, let's make him heartbroken, because sometimes that's the part of your life you have so little control over. It worked out pretty good. We've had a nice year.
Yeah. One other episode we wanted to touch on was in 2008, you guys did a crossover with CSI.
Mm-hmm.
So you worked on a CSI episode. They came over to 2.5 Men. Can you just talk briefly about that?
It began up at the TV festival in Banff. in Canada, and Carol Mendelson, who is the executive producer of CSI, was up there, and we became friends. And I said to her, I've always wanted to write an autopsy scene, it'd be fun. Write a funny autopsy scene. What kind of things can you take out of a human body? It's a really awful Carrot Top sketch, and that conversation turned into, we should write a CSI, and you guys can write a 2.5 Men, and it was done in jest. And then she did an interview up there, and the interviewer asked her, "What's coming next for CSI next year?" It was in the spring. And she said, "Well, we're going to write a 2.5 Men episode, and the 2.5 Men writer is going to write a CSI." And like an hour later, reporters from Los Angeles are emailing and calling and texting, "Is it true?" And I'm like, "Carol, what have you done?" Now we're kind of committed. And it kind of got put on the back burner because a writer's strike happened that fall. But after the writer's strike was over, I don't know why, we just were dumb enough to go for it. And, and I had the motivation to write a story about a sitcom diva being murdered, and everyone is the suspect. I don't know where I got that from. It just came to me.
And as far as 2.5 Men, where do you see this show going, and do you know where it's going to end?
I do not. I have no ability to. This is all. Year 9 is already a miracle, so I have no way of knowing what's happening next. I know there's been some interest on CBS's part to keep it going. That a year 10 is being discussed. Ashton is only made a 1-year deal. I don't think any of the actors are signed past this year, so I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
And then in 2007, you created The Big Bang Theory.
Co-created The Big Bang Theory.
So can you just tell us quickly the premise of the show and where that came from?
It came from a conversation with my old friend and colleague, Bill Prady, who worked with me on Dharma and Greg. And Bill wanted to do something. He wanted to develop something with me, and we kicked around some ideas for a while, and we were talking about a young woman coming into her own, living by herself for the first time in her life without father and boyfriend, and that went nowhere. It was a dead end. And then one day he was talking about his life in the 80s in New York as a computer programmer, and all the guys he worked with, and they were geniuses, as is Bill, and but they're entirely maladapted to the world. The guys who can figure pi to 80 decimals but can't do a tip in a restaurant because there's too many variables. I just remember when he's telling me those stories about these characters, and I was laughing my ass off because it was just hilarious that these brilliant guys were so ill-equipped to live in the real world, and it was sort of a beautiful mind without the paranoid schizophrenia that kind of took away some of the comedy of it. And we quickly came to the idea that the two elements could marry, that this young woman could be our entree into a world of brilliance, that she's us, she's the audience in their world. And then the real big creative move, too, was to take it away from computers and go into pure science. Physicists, Richard Feynman, Stephen Hawking, not Bill Gates, not Steve Jobs, but, particle physicists, string theory, guys that have no economic incentive. They just want to unravel the universe, but can't talk to a woman.
How much effort do you put into making sure that the science is accurate? Is there a lot of research?
We haven't become physicists since the show began. So we have a physicist on staff as a consultant, a astrophysicist from the University of California, UCLA, and David Salzberg is a professor there, and he guides us in all things science. As Bill likes to point out, we can sit in that writer's room forever, and we're not going to become physicists. So when we hit the point where physics and science has to be addressed in the dialogue, we have to call David. Okay, what are we doing here? What's the math? Because we're not going to write the math. No one's going back to school.
And there's so many single camera sitcoms nowadays, but you're so good at the multi-camera. Why do you stick to that format even though others aren't succeeding there?
Well, for one thing, the environment we're in at CBS is really conducive to audience shows. They've never run away from it there. They've just never been that hip to run to the single camera format. And also when we started 2.5 Men, we were after one of the landmark comedies of American television, which was Everyone Loves Raymond. And that's a real, it's a landmark show, and it set the tone for Monday night comedy. And it didn't seem to be any real reason to run from it. It's in a way, it's rewarding because you get audience feedback. It's frustrating because you get audience feedback. They don't always think you're hilarious. It's limiting because there's things you can do single camera that you can't do in front of an audience. I mean, you can't, it's not a little movie, it's a little play, and a little play is much more restrictive than a little movie. It just kind of happened that way. I don't think there was a great big plan to how many cameras to use.
Can you talk a little bit about the theme song?
The theme song for The Bang. Well, we got Ed Robertson from the Bare Naked Ladies on the phone. He's up in Canada, and I think they're in Toronto. They're in Toronto? I think they're in Toronto. I'm not sure. They did a song many years ago, a big hit song called "Was It One Night?" And it was it last night? One night?
1 week.
1 week? See, I got this covered. And it was a beautiful narrative. It told the story of our relationship in a very compressed amount of time. And I had the silly idea that perhaps you could tell the story of the birth of the universe to the present moment in 20 seconds. And I presented them that, and they came back with that song. And they nailed it. They just nailed it. It was remarkable. It's a beautiful little song. It just, every time I hear it, I can't help but smile. I'm so proud that that's part of the show.
You on this show, you did a pilot that didn't air. That's kind of become a cult internet classic, and then the pilot that we all saw on TV. Penny was a different actress. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between those two?
The biggest difference was there was no Kuthapali, there was no Wolowitz, and Penny was a dark, toxic, somewhat, dangerous character. And it was horrible. It was, the only thing we did right in the first try was we had Jim Parsons and Johnny Galecki. But it was far too edgy than it was necessary. Too risque. We learned as a result of doing it that these characters are sweet and innocent, and the audience is very protective of them. It's just instinctive to want to protect them. They're extraordinary minds, but they're waifs. You want to reach out and make sure they're okay. And this character was a threat to them, and they did not like her. And if you don't like her, then you're kind of stuck. There's nowhere for this to go. And Nina Tassler called me. I was in Australia, actually, after we shot the pilot, and she called me and said, we're not picking up the show. We don't think it's right. And I said, I agree with you. I don't think we got it either. I think we missed. And she said, would you be willing to try again? And I went, I'd never gotten a do-over before, so I was pretty shocked. Yes, I'd be thrilled to we get a do-over. Usually when you fail in television, you just fail, and you just everybody tries to forget it ever happened. And but they gave us another chance, and I said, they thought it was casting. I said, it's not. The young lady who played the lead in the first pilot was terrific. It wasn't casting; it was writing. We didn't write it correctly. It was misconceived. So we wrote a new script. And we tried to save a few elements, and frankly, we shouldn't have. We should have thrown the whole thing out. But we rewrote it, and we changed the dynamic to a much more nurturing character nearby, and we really threw the story out. The story was they meet the girl, and he's enamored with the girl. The girl says, "Can you go to my old boyfriend's house and get my TV?" He goes to the old boyfriend's house to get the TV. He fails. Curtain. That was the end of the story. Nothing happened, except we met these characters, and these characters were remarkable, and we got lucky. We had every one of them is a terrific actor.
Do you know where this series is going?
Well, I know where it's going this year, but beyond that, no. No, we're not doing Lost. I don't know how it ends. I really don't.
Why do you think it's a hit? Why do you think people have embraced the nerds?
Well, we never wrote them as nerds. I mean, we've done jokes regarding that, but I think from the very beginning, we approached it as what would happen if we wrote about extraordinary minds, great minds, who are ill-equipped to deal with the mundane world that everyone takes for granted. But with the focus on that they are great minds, that they are extraordinary individuals. Nerds diminishes them, I think. It's too easy to just use that word and diminish them and make them, goofy characters. They're not. They're not slackers. They're not just goofy guys. Yes, they like comic books and all things Star Trek and Star Wars, but that's their hobby. That's how they escape the real world, because the real world is hurtful to people like this. Because it's inexplicable, it's dangerous, it's threatening, there's so much going on, and fantasy and science fiction is a place to escape to, and I think people feel, I know I do, feel a way of identifying with a character who's somewhat at sea with the world and trying to figure it out.
Tell us a little bit about working with Jim Parsons.
That's just been one of the great gifts of my career, to see a talent like that.
How did you cast him?
He came in and auditioned. He came in and auditioned for the part of Sheldon, and it was hilarious. It was shocking. It was like, oh my God. And I asked the casting director, Nikki Valco, who's, by the way, has been part and parcel to every one of these shows, and finding Angus and John and, all the characters on Big Bang. Going back to Dharma and Greg, she brought in all those actors on Dharma and Greg, other than Jenna, I said, can he come back in and do it again? Because I thought maybe it was a fluke of some kind. But it wasn't. He's a genius. He's a comic genius.
And talk about working with Johnny Galecki.
I worked with Johnny when he was 12. I think 12, 13 years old, back on Roseanne, first time I met him. So it's interesting now, here we are, what is it, 20 years later. He's a great actor to work with because he really has, over the years, come from a theater sensibility. And when he wasn't doing TV and film, he was in the theater. He's, and that theatrical sensibility is I think at the core of that is I'm an actor, not a star. I have a craft. I have an art that I'm working at, and it's an ensemble art form, and it's a great energy he brings to the cast as a result.
And talk a little bit about Kaylee Cuoco.
Kaylee is again another, she's 25 years old, and she's a great veteran. She's been working since she's a little kid. She's 25, and she's probably been working professionally for at least 15 years, And she worked with John Ritter and Katie Segal, and she was, I think that impacted on her and deepened her skill, and she's a very, very talented young lady, and these are hardworking actors on that set. They come prepared. They really know what they're doing. It's you kind of can just sit back and watch it now, because it's pretty elegant to watch how they work together.
So you have 2 shows up and running, and you decide to do a third. How did Mike and Molly come about?
Again, it came about as a result of a conversation with Mark Roberts, who had been working with me on 2.5 Men for 8 years. 7 years, I guess. Yeah, 7 years. And he wanted to do his own thing, and we started talking, and the script for Mike and Molly came about after about 6 or 7 months of writing and rewriting and writing and rewriting, and try this, try that, throw this out, throw that out. I mean, the guy in the restaurant was originally Russian. I said, no, let's make him. Food's an issue in this story. Let's make him somebody with a background where food was an issue. Senegal. Yeah. And OA became part of the story. People, who meet as a result of a mutual heartache, really, trying to get control over their bodies. And I thought that was a universal story to tell, especially in this country.
Why did you set it in Chicago?
Mark. That's Mark's home ground. That's where he's most comfortable. That's where he hails from. The location you can make the location a character in these shows. It can inform the show, and he knows Chicago really well, and great. Let's get out of Los Angeles. Both Big Bang and 2.5 Men is set in Los Angeles. Worlds apart, Pasadena and Malibu, but still, let's get far, far away and find a new environment that colors the show in a different way.
So as you said, weight was sort of the cornerstone of the premise.
Well, weight. It's not weight so much as as the desire to two people who are trying. It was Marty, in its essence. We talked a lot about Marty, the Borgnine film that was really a deep impact on me. I've been trying to capture that element for years in different things. People had given up hope that they were going to find someone and then but don't have the tools to necessarily carry. And who has the tools, really? But someone who's been on their own for a long time as an adult is even less likely to have the tools to carry on a relationship. So weight quickly became secondary. I hope it's fallen into the background on the show. People aren't seeing people with weight issues. They're seeing people. People with mother issues and job issues and, communication problems.
Can you talk a little bit about casting Melissa McCarthy and working with her?
Well, again, it goes back to Nikki Valco. She brought Melissa in. She was the first woman who came in and read for Molly, and she was remarkable. There's nothing else to say about it. She was real. She made the character come alive. It was obvious right away that she was Molly, and I think Billy was the first one who came in and read for the part of Mike, and and of course the nature of casting is, well, you can't believe that, it can't be right, first person in, we can't be that lucky, so let's keep looking. But they were, and they remain. It's obvious they were the right choice from the very first day.
Melissa said in her Emmy speech that you fought for her. Did you have to fight for her to give her?
Unfortunately, it was another one of those things where I disagreed with CBS over the casting of Melissa. That worked out okay.
And do you think that her success in Bridesmaids has had a positive impact on the show?
It certainly couldn't have hurt. I mean, more people getting to see what a great actress she is, what a comic talent she is. She's fearless. It certainly can only help the show.
So I think the biggest question everyone has for you is, how do you do it with 3 shows at the same time?
The answer is inefficiently. it's I don't know, it's chaos. You try and be where you're most needed, and be helpful. Try and be helpful. Ultimately, it's always about what's on the page. It's still a job. The producer title, I think, is a misnomer. It's about writing. It's always about writing. If the scripts aren't working, the actors are doomed, and the series is doomed. So it's about getting the scripts right, and I'm trying to participate in all 3 shows in a way that I can impact positively on the scripts without having the writers turn on me and kill me in my sleep. Because it can be very frustrating when somebody comes in and says, not this, this, after they've worked hard on this, and you go, no, not this, this. And I've been in that position where somebody's coming in and saying, I don't like this, let's change it. And it's really frustrating. It's heartbreaking, because if you're a good writer, and every one of these writers is a good writer, you get emotionally invested in the material. If you're not emotionally invested in the material, you shouldn't be doing the job. I mean, if it's just words on a page, then get out. If you don't care about this deeply, then you shouldn't be doing it. Because I think if you care about it, it shows up on the screen. Somehow that caring shows up on television. People get a sense that someone's involved in this thing that cares about it. It's not just a job.
And talk a little bit about your relationship with CBS.
Yeah, it's gotten pretty good. Yeah, they kind of leave me alone. I don't talk to them much.
Who do you work with mostly over there?
I don't know. The broadcast standards lady comes and tells me every week what we can't do on 2.5 Men. We don't really have those issues on the other 2 shows. Talk to Nina Tassler every once in a while. Once or twice a year, I say hi to Les. How's it going? The thing I admire about that company is, and I think it starts with Les, is he has a simple philosophy, which is if it ain't broke, leave it alone. And I've endeavored to try and make shows that ain't broke. Not the least, as a way of saying, leave me alone. I mean, if the show is functioning well and the stories are good and the comedy is functioning, then hopefully the audience responds, and you're not getting a lot of oversight. You're not getting people second guessing you. If the show starts to fail, you get a lot of second guessing and a lot of committee meetings, and no good comes of that. And good shows don't come out of committee meetings.
What have you learned about the business of TV since you've started?
If you succeed, they're nice to you. There was it is a business, but I think Stephen Bochco once gave me some great advice when I was doing Dharma and Greg, and he said, writers get treated like children because we act like children, we dress like children, and they treat us like children, and that stayed with me. That really impacted on me. Now, I didn't start dressing like an adult, nor did I start behaving like an adult, but I remembered what he said, and I know why we're childlike. It's because it's a childlike job to make stuff up. We're playing make-believe. We're playing pretend. What would happen if? And then we make a story, and we get invested in it. We get really, we care. Writers by nature care about what they write, and they want it to be good. And when the audience doesn't laugh, we feel like our lives are meaningless and that we have no worth and our self-esteem is shattered. And it's frightening. We're all going to die. Our career is over. It's real personal. But that personal butts into people who are running it like a business. They want to make money. They want the stock price to go up. They're not emotionally invested in the material. There are people who are, Peter Roth at Warner Brothers, I think, is one of the, anomalies in the executive suites where he cares. He genuinely cares about the material, and he's a fan. But most of these guys are businessmen, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying they don't love television and they don't appreciate a good comedy or a great drama. They're still people. They like to be entertained, but I think there's a business. It's show business. We do the show, and we need to be coddled and cared for and tolerated, and they do the business, which means that 20 or 30% out of every dollar is going to be stolen. That's fine. We know that. That's the nature of the business. So I didn't
what
really say
makes-
that. Did I? We should probably take that out. It's in some business that's called the skim, but okay. Here it's called overhead.
What makes a Chuck Lorre show? What's your signature style?
Gosh, I have no idea how to answer that question. I fundamentally believe that the characters, you have to care about the characters. If you care about the characters and you care about their relationships with one another, then there's a chance you might laugh at their behavior and their thinking. But you fundamentally first have to care about the people on screen. And that's partly writing and partly casting. You can write a really interesting character. If you have the wrong actor, the audience isn't going to make that leap of empathy. I think people on some level, they know it's fiction, they know it's silly, and they know everyone's overpaid, but they're still, they're rooting for Leonard and Penny maybe to find happiness, that Mike and Molly might actually, build a life together, there is that tug, and that's empathy, and I think that's the root of a show that I want to do, that I would want to watch. I want to care. Then if the character falls down the stairs, then it's possible I might laugh because I know who they are and I know where they were going.
Do you have any other projects in development right now?
I'm working on a nap. No, I actually I have something else I'm trying to do. I'm not willing to discuss it here.
Fair enough.
Suffice to say, it has nothing to do with television, and gets back a little bit to music. So.